All right, everyone. Now we've got to talk about the latest batch of Pentagon leaks, which are apparently real, although keep in mind when you're waging an info war, wink, wink, they can come out and say that they're real leaks when actually it's false information and they're just trying to stir up discord. So this could be the Pentagon or the DOJ or something distracting. It could be misinformation to confuse the Russians, could be misinformation to confuse the US or some other public. It's impossible to know whether it's real or not. I believe that there was a famous quote by a certain leader of the CIA some decades ago to that effect. Very interesting how these things coincidentally coincide. Anyway, the basic story, we're going to assume that they're real. There's a greater likelihood that they are. It might have been modified. They're warning about that too. These leaks were dumped on 4chan after, I believe, originally being in a Discord server. And then 4chan did its due diligence, and now they're everywhere. You can go and you can find them if you know what you're looking for, although they have tried to crack down. It's like, oh shit, quick, we gotta do some damage control here. Someone leaked up to and including top secret material from the Pentagon itself. And it's on a plethora of different subjects, so whoever did the leaking, assuming the leak is real, they probably had significant access. They were probably fairly high up within the Pentagon's chain of command, which might be why they're scrambling. They limited internal data flow for a few days there for a reason. I think that they're wondering, hey, who has probably been answering emails to the motherland on their home computer in Chinese or Cyrillic or something like that? We don't know. 10 to 1 odds says if it's real that China's involved more than anyone else, but they'll blame it on the Russians because it's more politically convenient. Anyway, point number one. According to the documents that were released, the United States has new systems for conducting live surveillance on things that are happening in various parts of the world, especially the Ukrainian theater of war. And that this allows for a forewarning to the Ukrainians about potential military attacks. And it appears several of those attacks on civilian targets went unheeded, and I have a feeling that I know why. Again, we're assuming the Pentagon leak is real. If you disclose the fact to the Ukrainians and say, hey, get the civilians out of this area, and the Russians see that, then they will put two and two together and realize, hey, somehow they knew what we were going to do before we did it. Well, then they figure out potentially why you knew them. So you sacrifice some civilians or even Ukrainian soldiers in order to cover up the fact that you've got something that deployed from space that allows you to see what they're doing with greater clarity than any currently other operative satellite system. Which is interesting. Hey, when is Google going to get one of those? You could, the street level would be even better if you were to finally do that. Turns out, according to the summation here, the Ukrainian casualties are quite high and that Russian casualties are somewhat lower than publicly mentioned. That is, that the government is lying to people when it says, oh yeah, 1 million Russians have died and half their tanks are gone and there's losing left and right. Well, if these documents in unaltered state are real, that points to a very, very different conclusion, and it's one that's plausible. A lot of the Russian forces are conscripts. They're not going to fight as well. But you have the Wagner Group and others. You have mercs in there. These people have experience. You do have elite soldiers there. And the Russians do outnumber the Ukrainians and have significantly more technologically capable systems of their own. Now, at the outset of the war, before NATO countries began giving all sorts of tanks and jets and shit to Ukraine, the Russians outmatched them technologically in almost every aspect. It always did seem odd, therefore, that there'd be such a disparity in Ukraine's favor with regards to everything other than, hey, they're fighting on their home turf. So the Russians have to advance on targets that have been dug in to some degree, which they did begin sometime prior. So that never made sense. Also, we have surveillance, spying on U.S. allies, which has been covered up, by the way. You'll note that particular leak is very seldom mentioned in the legacy media reporting on the Pentagon leaks. Well, I wonder why that could possibly be. Anything inconvenient for the Biden administration. I remember when Obama got angry, Merkel angry at him for spying on her personal cell phone. That was a big thing at the time. But with Joe Biden, they've really cracked down on anything within the media that would anger anyone against the United States. You'll know that definitely one hand washes the other. The legacy media gets all the exclusive reporting and shit anyway. And so then they do Biden a solid. Well, not Biden, but his handlers and so forth. The neolib global cons in the uniparty system that are slowly trying to Chinify the entire world and make it into a hellscape. And anyway, you can go through this. Link in the description, archived, of course. There's a whole lot of material here to unpack. I'll probably discuss it more in my live stream later in more detail. The big thing that's being covered, though, is anything pertinent to Ukraine. I would think that the spying apparatus simply being massively more sophisticated, or at least engorged, than previously believed, I would think that that would be the main news. Because, again, it's targeting U.S. allies. It's not like, hey, we've developed this new system for, figuring out what the Taliban is doing. We're monitoring ISIS more easily than in the past. That's fine. You're monitoring some guerrilla group or something, commies out in the jungle. You're talking about state actors with which we've got data sharing agreements and military alliances, and they're still being spied on. Now, let's not mince words. Allies spy on each other routinely. This doesn't just happen from the U.S. It happens. The Russians do it. I'm sure that they wiretap the Belarusians. The Chinese, I'm sure they wiretap the North Koreans, and probably in reverse too. The French wiretap the Germans, and the Germans wiretap the English, and the Dutch wiretap the Belgians, and so on forth. That would be abnormal if that didn't happen. But when you get caught out doing it, normally it rankles people. So you just don't report on it now, do you? Notably absent from 9 out of 10 of the legacy media takes. The original leaks are far more concerning than all of the analysis with regards to the content. Again, that's why I lean towards them being real. Because if they're not real, well, they were created, they were manufactured for a U.S. government purpose. You want all of that material to be reported on now, don't you? That way you can catch people out and spreading disinformation or whatever. You can sort of mark where it spreads and who's saying what and who's talking about what. And you can sort of gauge who's loyal or not, I suppose. You could do a loyalty exercise sort of thing with the legacy media even. But that's not what's happening. A lot of it's being redacted. And you notice nobody is linking to the full actual documents themselves from the legacy media, despite the fact that that is actually legal now that they have been leaked. De facto declassification right there. Maybe you don't download them, but you can read them freely and it's all good. That's about all. Peace out.